Into it. Welcome to another segment of Lore You Should Know. That is the little segment here on Dragon Talk where we talk to Mr. Chris Perkins. Hi, Chris.
Hi there.
About little bits of Dungeons and Dragons lore that are just fun to know about, as well as things that you can use in your game. And today we are going to talk about Nautiloids.
Yes. And I must caution people, if you're going to use Nautiloids in your game, you have two choices. They can either be fully operational or non-functional. And depending on the choice you make, could take your campaign in some very interesting directions.
Yes.
Yes.
We recently, many folks in the Dungeons and Dragons community, and if you haven't, I strongly suggest you check out this video. It was released by our friends at Larian as the cinematic before Baldur's Gate 3. And I won't spoil any of it here. Actually, we probably will through the course of this conversation.
A little bit.
But it does feature a Nautiloid pretty prominently, as well as the interior, the exterior, and a lot of its capabilities. So that was the inspiration for us talking about it today.
Yes. And so for those who don't know, a Nautiloid is a mind flayer vessel that moves through air, through space, and through various planes to get around. It is the primary vessel by which mind flayers travel from world to world. And Nautiloids first appeared in, can you guess?
I want to say Barrier Peaks.
No, but that's an excellent guess.
Oh, okay.
Barrier Peaks predates Nautiloids by about a decade. But they first appeared in Spelljammer campaign setting, box set.
Really? They had not been dramatized before that?
Nope.
Oh.
So their first appearance was in Spelljammer, which of course was the second edition D&D campaign, Adventurers in Space. Yes, exactly. And the conceit of Spelljammer is that every solar system is basically encased in something called a crystal sphere, and you can travel between crystal spheres in vessels of all sorts. And the Mind Flayer vessel that was depicted in the box set was the Illithid Nautiloid, which looked like a multi-deck vessel with a big kind of curling in on itself shell and tentacles coming out that's of course where it gets its name, from the Nautilus of the sea, which has a shell very similar. They have very striking similarities in terms of appearance. But this is a giant vessel that flies through space and has tentacles coming off its nose, and it almost looks like a flying creature in its own right. And of course, if you've seen the Larian video, there is some roof to the Nautiloids. They're sort of semi-organic vessels by design.
Yeah, it's that idea that like there is so much magic infused in it that it is life. You know, it is alive in some ways, right?
Exactly. But there are things that Larian did with the Nautiloids that had never been done before in game. For instance, in the Spelljammer box set, the original Nautiloid had these tentacles sort of entwined coming off the front of it, but they used it primarily as a ram to ram into other ships, or as a grappling device to grapple other ships. In the Larian video, we see tentacles actually reaching down and grabbing people and then teleporting them inside the vessel where they can be captured, implanted, turned into thralls, or all sorts of crazy stuff. Yeah. So they really kind of ran with the ball on that one.
Was there any type of teleportation or beaming in the way they were described in Spelljammer?
No.
Okay, so that was a new addition.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sexy new addition. Oh, right. It totally makes sense. I mean, you know, it makes it very easy for the Mind Flayers to get what they need, which are brains, and they don't have to leave the comfortable confines of their own ship to do it. They can do it all by remote. Another thing that Larian took the ball and ran with was this idea that Mind Flayer vessels can plane shift, instantaneously transport themselves from one plane to another by basically thrumming on a cord, which is a very interesting way to handle it, because the Planescape spell as you know, has a particular material component, and that's a tuning fork.
Bing.
That has to sound off. Well, the Mind Flayers basically have their equivalent of a tuning fork that can cause the vessel and all of its crew and everyone aboard to plane shift instantaneously.
I love that interpretation of both those things, because when you're watching that video, you're not really sure what the Mind Flayer is doing, what the Illithid is doing when he's bringing these two kind of almost they reminded me of Avatar, of that like conjunction of two organic things that's turning, and then being able to pull it like a guitar string, and feel that like thrumming is actually what creates the portal that allows it to travel in between planes, was a wonderful extrapolation of a bunch of D&D ideas.
Yes, exactly. So there are many, 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 many Nautiloids, although probably not as many as there used to be. And as we say in Volo's guide to monsters, the Mind Flayers are basically no longer able to build them. Their empire is so fractured and destroyed, and a lot of their original knowledge was lost. So basically, there's a finite number of Mind Flayer Illithid Nautiloids in the galaxy or in the multiverse now.
How did Mind Flayers start using Nautiloids? Was there another race of creatures that they subjugated?
Mind Flayers are known for subjugating a vast number of races, including the Gith, the Duergar, the Kuatoa, among others. But the knowledge to create Nautiloids is something they developed autonomously. And they used it primarily for colonization, to get from their dark bound places to other worlds in search of more brains. You know, you eat all the brains on a planet, suddenly you need more brains. What are we going to do? Let's build something, go to another planet and get some more brains. And that's kind of how those things, what they were built for.
Makes sense.
Now, their crews tend to be pretty small. There's not a whole pile of Illithids on a given Nautiloid, partly because Illithids like their space. Genius takes space. And then part of it is that they also need room for things like thralls.
Is there ways to transport elder brains upon Nautiloids?
Yes, although typically there are different kinds of Illithid vessels. The Nautiloid is kind of the stock model, but there's also something called an Illithid dreadnought, which is a really big Nautiloid that can have it's big enough for a large brine pool to accommodate an elder brain. So if you need to relocate an elder brain for some reason, you're probably going to see one on one of those bigger vessels. They also have smaller sort of shuttlecraft-like vessels that they can send down to planets that are less visible and less likely to attract attention. Now, Mind Flayers in Spelljammer, as you may or may not know, ships propel themselves through space using devices called helms, which on most ships look like chairs. But on a lot of Mind Flayer vessels, they're actually pools that Mind Flayers kind of sink themselves into. And their psionic energy transmits through the fluid in these pools to basically propel the ship. Now, there's some speculation that the ship itself does have an intelligence, and that's basically done during the construction phase of the ship, which, as I mentioned before, Mind Flayers can't do anymore. But as they were building these organic ships, they would basically run veins through them and pump a slurry of basically liquefied brain matter.
Ooh. And
it is this brain matter that basically suffuses the ship with enough intelligence to control its key systems and so on and so forth. So there's a little bit of, with Mind Flayers, you're always dealing with sort of a quasi-science or sort of a magical science to it. And so that feels very, in a way, futuristic or very much unlike typical magic tech that we see in the game.
And that's why they don't need as much crew, because all you really need is a helmsman, and the ship does the rest of the work, right?
Yes. Now, the first time an Illithid Nautiloid appeared in an adventure was in Dungeon Magazine in issue 28. There was a adventure about a crashed Illithid Nautiloid that you could basically search and plunder. It was very straightforward. It was a non-operational ship, but that was the first instance of one that actually appeared, and that was released shortly after the Spelljammer campaign setting came out.
And was it a way to kind of introduce the ideas of this ship, into more terrestrial or material plane bound adventures, so that people could get like a conception of what that means.
There's the issue cover right there.
Nice.
You can see the Illithid Nautiloid.
And that's it flying. That's it not crashed yet, right?
Correct. Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
That's moments before its ultimate fate.
Yes. And that's why I actually guessed Barrier Peaks, because I think I had a dungeon master who, must have been inspired by this adventure, as well as kind of the idea that there's this ancient technology that is discovered, and basically it was a mega dungeon that we one of the areas of the mega dungeon was a crashed Illithid ship that had all this wondrous technology upon it.
Yes. So if you're wondering where that ship is, it actually crashed in the Forgotten Realms.
Oh.
Basically slamming down east of Neverwinter. So
we can go find it.
Oh yeah, it's probably still there.
Nice. Well, I'll take my girls there after we finish with the Dragon of Icespire Peak.
Oh yeah. Good times.
Nice. Well, I love that Nautiloids have all of these, kind of ties to Spelljammer, but is there a way to, use them in, by finding a crash site or something like that? Like, how would you as a dungeon master want to incorporate this knowledge into your games now?
I think that, for instance, in 5th edition, we put an Illithid vessel in Undermountain. That you can find. It's not a Nautiloid. It's a different kind of Illithid ship. It's called a scavenger. And
was that one of the shuttle ships that you were just?
Yeah, it's a good sized ship, but it's sort of got a different configuration. It's smaller than a Nautiloid though, so yeah, it'd be more like a shuttle. And this is sort of a textbook way of introducing this kind of thing, where you basically find a landed vessel, and if you can figure out how it works, maybe you can use it and take off with it. The other way to go is to actually have a campaign where you start aboard the ship having been abducted. And then you have to kind of break free of your Illithid masters. And then you're stuck on this ship, which you may or may not be able to control. It may be on a predetermined course and you don't know where. It might just deposit you somewhere, or crash into something, or lead you into the heart of some, space asteroid field with monsters living on asteroids and things like that. So the idea of you starting as a prisoner is also an interesting angle. Then there is one of the stories that I've been toying with, maybe for my own campaign, is an idea that Illithid Nautiloids are basically converging on a world, and deciding, hey, this is going to be our next big world plunder, and you have to stop them, and ultimately you have to find a way to get shot up into space to take out the elder brain that's basically in orbit controlling all of this activity.
You can almost make it like a Borg attack type idea, where there's this hive of creatures that are all being controlled by one point, and if you can get to that one point, you might be able to take out the whole fleet.
Another thing that mind flayers are fond of doing is insinuating themselves into places with ample brains. So there was an old adventure in 3rd edition called Speaker of Dreams, which James Wyatt wrote. And it basically had this town that was in the thrall of a mind flayer, who was sort of the power behind the throne. It was disguised, so you didn't know what it was. But you could imagine that upon uncovering the fact that mind flayers are walking and living among us, that they might have a secret ship hidden somewhere, maybe out in the woods or over the mountains or over that hill. And if you can find it, you can steal it, take it, and begin your life as a Nautiloid captain, pirate, plying space in your own Nautiloid.
That's cool. Well, and that made me think of an idea of like, is there cloaking technology? Can Nautiloids, have an invisibility spell cast on them?
Absolutely. If you have a ship that can plane shift, you can almost certainly have a ship that can turn invisible.
Yeah. So I wonder if it's, instead of it's being over a hill or hidden in some ways, it's there right above the town, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
Mind Flayer is able to exert his influence just by.
The only problem with that is you'd see birds flying into it.
Yeah, but that's
like, you just see birds dropping out of the sky. Like, what the hell's going on?
but I mean, as a dungeon master, that'd be a great detail. You just be like, oh, you
Yeah.
just see a bird and it falls down. What happened? And then
Huh?
that's how they start to figure it out.
Bird stroke.
Oh, that clever druid spell, bird stroke. Evil druid, though, clearly.
Clearly, yes.
Yeah, exactly. All right. So if you were a Nautiloid captain, what would your name be?
Captain Tentacles.
Tentacles. All right, reminds me of Dr. Tentaculus, the character from Monster Madness, the Dungeon Mayhem thing that just came out.
Nice.
By the way, my daughter cannot pronounce that name to save her life.
Understandable.
It's really amusing to hear her try to sound it out. It's amazing. She must be under Mind Flayer influence. That's probably why.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
We many of us are.
I think we all are. There actually is a Mind Flayer hanging over here. That's been telling me all the things that I need to know and talk on here on Dragon Talk. Well, awesome. Any other bits about Nautiloids that we want to get out there, other than go watch the Baldur's Gate 3 cinematic if you have not yet seen it?
No, I think we've just about covered it. Because they haven't been used a ton. I think there's not a whole lot of lore there, unless you want to know things like their cargo capacity, which I think we don't need to know. But, yeah.
What's their cargo capacity? 400 pounds.
Let me tell you, their cargo capacity is.
And how much is wheat in this system?
35 tons.
35 tons. All right. Well, I think we're all going to be starting a really amazing Spelljammer campaign that allows us to trade and do some commodities training, because everyone loves that in D&D.
Absolutely. And I'm sure all the folks out there in the real world listening to this podcast now know that Spelljammer has indeed been confirmed. Yeah.
At least 40 times over the last few months. Still confirming it each time.
Exactly.
All right. Well, awesome.
Yeah. I ran a Spelljammer campaign for 5 years, so I'm a big fan.
I want more people to jump in, and now they'll be able to do that with this Nautiloid information. If
Indeed.
People wanted to ask you though about what your favorite Spelljammer ship is, how could they do so?
I am on Twitter at Chris Perkins DND.
Excellent. We will be inundated with more Spelljammer questions, I'm sure, and we'll be back with some more lore coming up.